Morning.
Who knew that Iain Duncan Smith was going to be your biggest ally in all of this?
I don't think Iain Duncan Smith is an ally at all. Iain Duncan Smith has presided over the most terrible treatment of people with disabilities and the most vulnerable in our society. He's finally found a conscience and resigned, and his successor is now looking for exactly the same level of cuts from somewhere else within that budget. This is a budget that doesn't add up, it's unravelled, and I think it's George Osborne who should be appearing before the Commons and explaining exactly what his budget now is.
Well, we're not hearing from the Chancellor. We've not heard from him all weekend. We're certainly not hearing from him this morning. His credibility, his position is being questioned. Do you think he should resign as Chancellor?
Indeed, I think he has to consider his position because he's put forward a budget that was predicated on 4 billion cuts to personal independence payments over this Parliament, and at the same time proposed tax cuts at the other end of the scale on corporation tax and capital gains tax. It's not a credible budget. It simply doesn't add up. I really fail to see how Parliament could possibly approve it.
We are going to be hearing from the Prime Minister at around 3:30 this morning, Prime Minister's questions. What do you want to hear from him, and what are you going to be putting to him over all of this?
Well, I understand the Prime Minister's statement that he's due to make to Parliament this afternoon after the EU Council on the refugee crisis and the way in which Turkey and Greece are being treated and have to act within this. But I think he should actually be making a statement about the budget and about the way his government is operating. And so I've no doubt that these issues are going to be raised as well within Parliament today.
Well, the government have gone from promoting the budget to now defending it today. They do seem to be fighting fires on all fronts, not just on this issue of disability benefits, but also on the sugar tax as well. We're hearing that big companies may plan to sue them over this. What other climb downs would you like to see from them? Because let's face it, they're going to be making another embarrassing U-turn in a second year when it comes to the budget.
Well, they haven't made a total U-turn on personal independence payments. Yes, they announced it in the budget. A day later, they said it was actually consultation, not a proposal. And then a couple of days after that, the new secretary says it's not going to be proceeded with, but they're looking for, in their words, savings elsewhere in that budget. So it's not a complete climb down. What I want to see is a protection of the DWP budget, a protection of the payments for those with disabilities within our society, because that is the heart of it. How do we treat people in our society? Do we have tax breaks at the one end for those that can well afford to continue paying the current or even enhanced rates of tax, and we then hit those who want to live independently and contribute to society, whatever their disability is? It's basically an issue about justice.
You say that, but the government would argue that they have been squeezing money out of middle-income earners and the higher band rate of taxpayers as well. So the money is coming from them as well.
Well, everybody does pay tax, or should. All corporations should pay tax.
The 40p rate of tax, they would say that they have made roads to get more money out of those groups of society.
Well, they've actually lowered the rate of taxation at the top end of the scale. That seems to me to be wholly wrong when at the same time you're cutting disability budgets. Surely the priority ought to be to say, well, whatever the circumstances, those that need help and support through a decent society, such as personal independence payments, should have them protected and guaranteed. It seems to me there's a sort of lurking wolf there in the DWP that's going around saying, how can we get more money off those who probably need it the very most?
So Labour would protect the DWP budget as a whole. There is a big black hole in the finances now if this is scrapped. How would Labour fill it?
We would promote an expanding economy. We would promote greater levels of capital investment in our economy to encourage economic growth, so that instead of an austerity programme, we would actually be promoting a growing economy. Obviously, more people in work on better wages pay more tax than a lot of people out of work on low wages. That surely is the right direction to go. What we've had is 6 years of austerity when they said it would all be over in 5. Osborne is now saying it won't even be over by 2020. He's now looking at 2021, 22, 23. Whatever the 5-year plan is with Osborne, it's always 5 years away.
OK, well, all that is going to play out in the Commons later on this afternoon. I just want to bring up an issue that's dogging your party at the moment, and this anti-Semitism row that seems to be gathering pace, particularly over the last few days. Allegations of anti-Semitism within Labour Party ranks. Now, speaking out yesterday, the Labour peer Lord Levy said he would quit the party unless you deliver a categoric and specific condemnation of anti-Semitism.
Lord Levy clearly hasn't been listening to the 7 times since I became leader I've absolutely condemned anti-Semitism, I've condemned Islamophobia, I've condemned any form of racism anywhere within our society. It is absolutely something I totally passionately believe in, and I'm disappointed that Lord Levy has made these remarks. He knows full well what my views are. He knows full well what the views of the Labour Party are. He knows full well the kind of decent, inclusive society that we all want to live in. I look forward to having that discussion with him. If there is anybody behaving badly anywhere in society, any kind of racism, it has to be dealt with, it has to be investigated. I had a long meeting with a group of women in my constituency, Muslim women, who told me the levels of abuse they receive on the buses and trains. Transport for London are dealing with that because I've asked them to. Exactly the same applies to anybody else. Jewish women or Jewish men, if they're abused on the street, deserve exactly the same protection as everybody else. We have to recognise we are a multi-faith, multicultural, multi-ethnic society and behave with decency and respect and inclusivity towards everyone. And that is exactly what I'm doing as leader of the party. That's exactly what the Labour Party stands for. We're the party that introduced the first Race Relations Act. We're the party that introduced the Human Rights Act. We're the party that introduced the Equalities Act. We're the party that stands up for that decent, inclusive society that we all want to live in.
But Mr Corbyn, you find yourself having to state that here on Sky News this morning. Why isn't that message getting through? Why is one of your Labour peers having to ask that question? You have got internal investigations going on within the Labour Party as to some of your members. I use the example of Vicky Kirby, who was excluded from the party over anti-Semitism, then included in the party, then excluded again, then back in. Why isn't this trickling through the Labour Party ranks?
It is very much through the Labour Party ranks. It's something that's fully understood throughout the Labour Party, fully understood. And we do take action on the very, very, very small number of cases where anything happens. And if we hear any allegations, they are properly and thoroughly investigated. This is a party that stands up for all the things that we as a society absolutely believe in. And if there are complaints, if anybody has, then they will be investigated as they are being investigated at the present time. But the idea that somehow or other there's a tolerance of any form of racism is wholly and totally fallacious.
OK, Jeremy Corbyn, Labour leader, thank you for speaking to us here on Sky News Sunrise.